The late afternoon sun had begun its slow descent, painting the streets of the small town in burnt shades of orange. Susan adjusted the strap of her worn handbag, balancing the weight of grocery bags in both hands. She quickened her steps, eager to get back to her little apartment before Zuri started asking where dinner was. Susan's life had become a series of careful calculations. Every dollar had a purpose. Every minute stretched to cover double the work. Between her shifts at the diner and the cleaning job she picked up in the evenings, exhaustion had become her constant companion. Still, she never allowed herself to falter in front of Zuri. Her daughter deserved laughter, love, and the sense that their tiny, cluttered home was still safe. At 28, Susan carried herself with a strength born of necessity. But the weariness showed. Her hands bore faint cracks from dish soap and harsh cleaners. Her hair, once styled daily, was now often swept into a quick bun. Yet even in her fatigue, there was a quiet beauty about her, one she never noticed, though others sometimes did. It was on this particular evening, as the air hinted of rain, that Susan first saw him. Joel Talley sat on the curb outside the corner bakery, a hood pulled low over his face, his clothes rough and rumpled. To the world, he was just another homeless man, shoulders hunched, hands tucked into his pockets as though bracing against a cold only he could feel. His beard was several days untrimmed, his shoes worn nearly to the sole. In truth, Joel was neither destitute nor desperate. Only a handful of people knew that the man sitting in the shadows was in fact Joel Talley, billionaire tech mogul and founder of one of the most successful companies in the country. But Joel had grown tired of endless meetings, sycophants, and the shallow flattery of those who only valued him for his wealth. For months he had disappeared from the glare of the corporate world, moving through cities and small towns dressed in anonymity. He longed for something real, someone who could see him not as a billionaire, but simply as a man. And so he sat there silently watching the stream of people pass by, waiting for the moment when fate might intervene. Susan noticed him as she passed the bakery. He looked up briefly and she caught his eyes, blue-gray, startlingly sharp, even beneath the tired shadows. Most people avoided eye contact with the homeless. But something about his gaze lingered with her. She slowed her steps. Her instinct was practical. She barely had enough to keep Zuri fed, let alone offer charity to strangers. Yet, in the lines of his face, Susan saw something beyond poverty. Loneliness, weariness, the look of someone who had been invisible for too long. She exhaled, half annoyed with her own soft heart, and set her grocery bags down. "Are you hungry?" she asked. Joel blinked, startled. Few people stopped and even fewer spoke with gentleness. He nodded once almost cautiously as though afraid to hope. I could be," he replied, his voice deep but quiet. Susan opened one of her bags, pulled out a wrapped sandwich she'd picked up for Zuri's snack, and held it out. "It's not much, but here." Before Joel could respond, a small hand tugged at Susan's sleeve. "Mommy, why is he sitting in the rain?" Zuri's wide brown eyes peered up at Joel with innocent curiosity. Her pigtails bounced as she tilted her head. Susan crouched, brushing her daughter's cheek. "He just doesn't have a place to stay, sweetheart." Zuri's gaze didn't waver. Instead, she smiled at Joel with the kind of unfiltered kindness only children possess. "Hi, my name's Zuri. You don't look scary. You look nice." Joel's throat tightened unexpectedly. It had been years since anyone, especially a child, had spoken to him so openly without suspicion or expectation. He found himself smiling back, a small, hesitant curve of his lips. "Hello, Zuri," he said softly. Susan hesitated, studying him. She had learned to be cautious, especially with strangers. Life as a single mother demanded it. But something about the man didn't trigger the alarms in her gut. His voice was calm, his posture unthreatening. If anything, he looked more broken than dangerous. "You can't sit out here all night," she murmured half to herself. She picked up her groceries, then extended one bag toward him. "Come on, at least walk with us. You can carry this if you want to repay the sandwich." Joel stared at her in surprise. People had offered money before or the occasional meal, but never companionship, never dignity. He stood slowly, accepting the bag. "Thank you," he said. As they walked, Zuri slipped her hand into his without hesitation. Joel froze at the small warmth against his palm, a sensation that disarmed him completely. Susan watched their joined hands with a mix of weariness and wonder. It wasn't every day she trusted someone new around her daughter. Yet Zuri's instinct was rarely wrong. They reached the narrow building that held Susan's apartment. She unlocked the door, glancing back at Joel. "You can wait here on the steps while I get dinner ready," she said cautiously. "If you want," Joel nodded. "I'd like that." Inside, Susan set the groceries on the counter, her mind buzzing. What was she doing? Inviting a stranger? Even one who seemed kind to linger near her home. Yet her conscience reminded her of his eyes, the unspoken gratitude when Zuri smiled at him. Zuri, meanwhile, leaned against the window, peeking out at Joel, where he sat quietly on the steps, his shoulders no longer slumped as heavily. "Mommy," she whispered. "He looks less sad now." Susan paused, looking at her daughter. Then almost unwillingly, she smiled. Joel sat outside staring at the darkening sky. For the first time in a long time, warmth flickered in his chest. Not from the sandwich, but from something far rarer, kindness without a price tag. He thought of the countless dinners he had attended, surrounded by glittering chandeliers and champagne glasses, where laughter was rehearsed and smiles were bought. Yet none of it had touched him the way Susan's simple gesture had. As the door creaked open, Susan stepped out holding a folded blanket. "Here," she said, offering it. Joel accepted it gently, his voice low. "You don't know what this means." Susan crossed her arms, her tone firm. "Don't mistake kindness for charity. I'm just doing what I'd hope someone would do for me if I were in your place." Joel studied her. She was tired. He could see it in the set of her shoulders, the faint shadows beneath her eyes. Yet she carried herself with dignity, with a strength wealth could never buy. He wanted to tell her everything, that he wasn't truly homeless, that he had the power to change her life with a single phone call. But instead, he said only, "My name's Eli." Susan raised an eyebrow. "Eli, huh?" He nodded, choosing the name as a shield. For now, truth would have to wait. Later that evening, as the rain began to patter on the roof, Joel remained on the steps wrapped in the blanket. Through the thin walls of the apartment, he heard laughter, Zuri's giggles, Susan's softer chuckle following behind. It struck him like a memory of a world he had never truly lived. Inside, Susan tucked Zuri into bed. The little girl's last words before sleep were simple. "Don't let Eli be lonely, Mommy." Susan lingered at the doorway, her heart tugging. When she finally stepped back outside, Joel looked up at her, rain glistening in his hair. She sat beside him on the step, the silence between them oddly comfortable. "Why are you really here?" she asked quietly. Joel hesitated, searching for words that weren't lies yet didn't expose his secret. "I guess I'm looking for something," he said at last. Susan turned her head, meeting his gaze. For a moment, the world narrowed to the space between them. The tired mother, the man with a hidden past, and the fragile beginning of something neither of them could yet name. Joel's thoughts echoed with surprising clarity. Maybe this is what I've been searching for. The next morning, Susan rose before dawn as she always did, quietly pulling on her uniform. The diner's breakfast rush waited for no one, least of all a single mother juggling bills and a restless child. She padded softly across the apartment, mindful not to wake Zuri. When she opened the front door, she stopped short. Joel was still there. He sat on the steps. Blanket wrapped around his shoulders, head bowed in sleep. His hair was damp from the night air, and yet he looked peaceful, as if this hard step outside her door had been the most restful place he'd known in a long while. For a moment, Susan just watched him. Something about his presence unsettled her, though not in the way a stranger normally would. Instead, it was the strange familiarity that disturbed her. He seemed at ease in her world, in her tiny space where kindness was shared in sandwiches and blankets. She cleared her throat softly and Joel stirred, lifting his head. His eyes met hers, still sharp despite the sleep. "You're still here," Susan said, her tone caught between surprise and caution. Joel nodded. "You said I could wait." Her lips twitched. "I didn't mean forever." "I'll earn my keep," he replied quietly. "If you'll let me." Something in his tone, earnest, almost humble, made her pause. She studied him, then sighed. "Fine, carry those groceries inside, and we'll see." By the time Zuri woke, Joel was already fixing a squeaky cabinet door in the kitchen. "Uncle Eli." Zuri's voice rang with excitement as she rushed forward. Joel froze at the name, then glanced at Susan. She arched a brow. "You've made an impression," she said dryly. Zuri grinned, hugging Joel's arm. "Can you come to school with me today?" Joel chuckled. "I don't think your teacher would appreciate that." But from that day on, Joel became a fixture in their lives. He picked up small chores without being asked, tightening loose knobs, sweeping the stoop, even carrying laundry up the worn stairwell. Susan, wary at first, found herself surprised at his willingness to help. He never complained, never acted entitled. Instead, he blended into their daily rhythm as though he had always belonged. Evenings grew warmer with his presence. One night, Susan returned from her shift to find Joel seated at the kitchen table with Zuri, carefully helping her with her math homework. The scene tugged at something deep inside her chest. For years, Susan had carried everything alone, the meals, the lessons, the tears. Now, here was this stranger gently explaining numbers as though he'd been waiting his whole life to do it. Later, after Zuri was in bed, Susan found herself laughing. Really laughing at one of Joel's stories. He spoke of odd jobs and strange encounters in a way that was vivid, almost too vivid for someone who claimed to have drifted aimlessly. His hands moved with the ease of someone used to commanding a room, his words flowing like a natural storyteller. Susan noticed. She noticed the intelligence in his phrasing, the careful courtesy in his manners. He might look rough, but nothing about him spoke of a man who had been beaten down by life. When she asked where he came from, Joel only smiled faintly. Nowhere important. Joel, for his part, felt the weight of secrecy pressing harder each day. Every laugh he shared with Susan, every small hand clasp from Zuri deepened his fear. How could he tell them the truth? That the man they welcomed into their modest home was in fact Joel Talley, billionaire and founder of Talley. His phone buzzed late at night when Susan slept. A burner he kept hidden. Associates left urgent messages. The board is panicking. Reporters are speculating about your disappearance. Joel, this can't go on forever. He would answer in hushed tones from the alley, his voice firm but weary. Handle it. I'm not ready to return. And each time as he slipped back into the apartment, he wondered how long he could keep up the lie. Trouble came sooner than expected. One afternoon, as Susan walked home with Zuri, a neighbor called across the street, "Be careful with that drifter, Susan. Men like him only bring trouble." Susan's jaw tightened. "He's been nothing but kind." The neighbor sniffed. "That's how they start. Don't let him near your girl too much." Susan pulled Zuri closer, her heart pounding with defensive anger. Yet later, alone, doubt nodded at her. She had fought hard to protect her daughter. Could she really trust a man she barely knew? The seed of uncertainty rooted deeper when Zuri, perched on Joel's knee one evening, asked innocently, "Uncle Eli, why don't you have a house?" Joel froze, Susan's eyes lifted, waiting for his answer. Joel cleared his throat. "Sometimes home isn't a place, Zuri. Sometimes it's the people who make you feel safe. Zuri nodded, satisfied. But Susan's gaze lingered on him. That was no answer. The days grew colder, and one rainy evening, the fragile wall between them cracked. Susan sat at the small kitchen table, her face buried in her hands. Bills lay scattered before her. Rent, utilities, school supplies. Tears pricked her eyes, but she fought them back. She had promised herself she would never let Zuri see her broken. Joel found her like that. Quietly, he pulled out the chair across from her. For a long moment, he said nothing, only waited. Finally, Susan lifted her head. I can't keep doing this. No matter how hard I work, it's never enough. Her voice trembled, and to her horror, a tear slipped free. Joel reached across the table, his hand covering hers. His palm was warm, steady. You're not alone, he said softly. You don't have to carry everything by yourself. The sincerity in his voice undid her. For the first time in years, Susan allowed herself to lean just slightly on someone else. Their eyes met, the air between them charged. Slowly, Joel leaned closer, his breath mingling with hers. For one heart-topping moment, she thought he might kiss her, and she almost let him. But the memory of her past, the betrayal, the abandonment, rose like a wall. Susan pulled back abruptly, standing so quickly her chair scraped the floor. I can't, she whispered, her chest heaving. I won't. Joel's jaw tightened, regret flashing in his eyes, but he nodded. I understand. That night, as he lay awake on the couch, Joel knew one thing with absolute clarity. He had to tell her the truth before this went any further. The truth, however, had a way of revealing itself sooner than intended. 2 days later, Susan's boss at the diner flipped through a magazine during the lull before closing. She frowned, tapping a page. Doesn't that look like your friend? The one who's been hanging around. Susan leaned over reluctantly, her breath caught. There on the glossy page was Joel. Clean-shaven, impeccably dressed, standing beside industry leaders at some gala. The caption read, Joel Talley, billionaire tech visionary rumored to be stepping back from the company he founded. The words blurred as Susan's heart pounded in her chest. Joel Talley. She heard again the neighbor's warning, the evasive answers, the mysterious phone calls. Her stomach twisted. When she returned home that evening, Joel was waiting by the door, his expression softening when he saw her. But Susan couldn't meet his eyes. You're not who you said you were, she whispered, voice trembling. Joel's face stilled, the mask slipping away. Susan's hands shook as she turned from him, doubt and betrayal crashing over her. Who are you really? The silence between them was heavy, almost unbearable. Joel stood frozen, knowing the moment he had dreaded had finally come. Susan, heart racing, could barely breathe around the storm of questions that threatened to unravel everything they had begun to build. Susan's world tilted beneath her. The glossy image of Joel Talley, the billionaire, flashed in her mind like a cruel joke. All the nights he had slept on her couch. All the meals she had shared with him, all the moments she had allowed him into her life. Had it all been a lie? When she confronted him, the words spilled out in a rush. Who are you really? She demanded, her voice breaking. Joel stood frozen in the dimly lit kitchen, his hands at his sides. His expression was not defensive, not angry, but weary. He drew in a breath, and for the first time since he had entered her life, the mask fell completely. My name is Joel Talley, he said quietly. I'm the founder of Talley. The magazines call me a billionaire. But to you, I've just been Eli. Susan flinched as if the name itself had betrayed her. He stepped forward, his voice roughened by honesty. I didn't lie to hurt you. I hid because I needed to know if someone could see me for who I am. Not what I own. The world has treated me like a walking wallet for so long, Susan. And then you, his voice cracked. You saw me. You gave me kindness when I had nothing to offer in return. Tears stung Susan's eyes, but anger blazed stronger. Kindness. Joel. I gave you food when I could barely feed my own daughter. I offered you a blanket when I couldn't even afford a new one for myself. And all the while she broke off, her voice, trembling. You let me believe you had nothing. Joel's eyes pleaded with hers. Because I needed to know it wasn't about money. I swear I never wanted to make you feel used. Every smile, every laugh we shared. It was real. But Susan's heart had hardened. She wrapped her arms around herself, the sting of betrayal cutting deep. You played with my life like some experiment. You watched me struggle while you sat on a fortune. That's not love, Joel. That's cruelty. Her words hit him like blows. He bowed his head, unable to deny her pain. I won't let you near Zuri again, Susan whispered. I won't risk her heart the way I risked mine. And with that, she turned from him, her tears falling freely now. Joel stood rooted in place, the hollow ache in his chest deeper than any loss he had ever known. The days that followed were heavy with silence. Susan avoided the diner gossip, avoided the neighbors' curious stares. At home, she tried to smile for Zuri, but her daughter's innocent questions pierced her like knives. Where's Uncle Eli? Why hasn't he come back? Susan forced a steady voice. He won't be visiting us anymore, sweetheart. Zuri frowned, her small face crumpling. But he promised to read me another story. Susan looked away, her chest tight. Sometimes people make promises they can't keep. Yet deep down, she knew Joel had never broken a promise to Zuri. That truth unsettled her more than anything. Meanwhile, Joel wrestled with despair. He returned briefly to the world he had left behind. The polished boardrooms, the eager faces of lawyers and investors. But the hollow applause, the endless figures on spreadsheets rang emptier than ever. For the first time, Joel didn't want power. He didn't want the empire he had built. He wanted Susan. He wanted Zuri's laughter echoing in the small kitchen. Susan's tired smile softening into trust. But he also knew he had broken something fragile, perhaps beyond repair. So he did the only thing he could. Quietly, without fanfare, he arranged for Susan's debts to be cleared. Not in his name, never in his name, but through an anonymous channel. The overdue rent notices disappeared. The weight of utility bills lightened. A letter arrived from the landlord offering leniency she had never expected. Joel never intended her to know it was him. He wanted no credit, no gratitude, only the hope that her burden might ease. One evening, Zuri tugged at her mother's sleeve as they washed dishes together. Mommy. Yes, baby. Uncle Eli didn't care about money. He cared about us. Susan froze, her hands slick with soap, her throat tightening. Out of the mouths of children, the truth was sometimes clearest. Joel had never once flaunted wealth. He had never lorded over her, never treated her with anything but respect. Even when he had nothing to gain, he had stayed fixing cabinets, helping with homework, holding her hand when she wanted to cry. Susan dried her hands slowly, her heart pounding. Maybe he had lied. But had everything between them been a lie? The next morning, she made a decision. For the first time, Susan left her comfort zone. Dressed in her plainest clothes, she stepped into a world she had only ever glimpsed in magazines. The gleaming glass tower of Talley Tech. The lobby was marble and steel, filled with people in tailored suits. She felt impossibly small, but she forced herself forward. I need to see Joel Talley, she told the receptionist, her voice steady. The woman arched a brow. Do you have an appointment? No, Susan admitted. But tell him Susan is here. He'll understand. The receptionist hesitated, then picked up the phone. Minutes later, two men in dark suits escorted Susan to the top floor. The office was vast, lined with glass that overlooked the city. Joel stood at the window, his silhouette stark against the skyline. When he turned and saw her, his expression shifted from surprise to disbelief. "Susan," he breathed. She stood there, her heart in her throat. "I don't want your money," she said quickly. "I don't want your empire. I just want the truth." Joel crossed the room, stopping just short of her. His eyes searched hers, raw and unguarded. "The truth is, I would walk away from all of this." He gestured at the towering office, the wealth surrounding him. "If it meant having you and Zuri." Susan's breath caught. "You'd give it all up." "In a heartbeat," Joel said, "because none of it matters without you. I don't need to be a billionaire. I just need to be the man who carries your groceries and helps Zuri with her math homework." His words struck something deep within her. For days, she had tried to convince herself he was just another liar. But looking into his eyes now, she saw no pretense, no arrogance, only truth. Susan's voice trembled. "If I let you back in, it has to be without lies. No more secrets." Joel nodded, his expression fierce with sincerity. "No more secrets. Only partnership. Only us." Silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility. Then Susan stepped forward, closing the gap, and for the first time, she let herself fall, not into fear, but into trust. Joel's arms wrapped around her, holding her as though he would never let go. Later, when they returned to the little apartment, Zuri's squeal of delight filled the air. "Uncle Eli," she cried, rushing into his arms. Joel swung her up, laughter breaking free from his chest. Susan watched them, her heart swelling with something she had thought lost forever. Hope. They ate dinner together that night, not in a grand dining hall, but at the same small table that had borne their laughter and tears. Joel didn't speak of stock markets or wealth. He spoke of dreams. Dreams of family, of laughter, of building a life not on riches, but on love. Susan realized then that true love wasn't about what someone could give you. It was about who they chose to be when stripped of everything else. And Joel had chosen to be hers. In the weeks that followed, their bond only deepened. The townsfolk who once whispered suspicion now watched with quiet awe as Joel, the billionaire who could have had the world, knelt to fix a neighbor's broken fence, carried groceries for elderly women, and walked hand in hand with a single mother and her daughter. For Joel and Susan, wealth no longer defined worth. Love did, sacrifice did, truth did, and as Zuri nestled between them one evening, her small hands clasped in theirs, Susan finally allowed herself to believe they were a family now. A family born not of fortune, but of faith, kindness, and the courage to see beyond appearances. True love is never about what you have. It's about who you are when all else is stripped away. The chandeliers sparkled like constellations above the grand ballroom, but Susan felt as though all the light in the world was already in her heart. She stood at the center of it, her hand nestled in Joel's, her engagement ring glinting like a promise she could finally believe in. The room had been transformed into something out of a dream. Cascading white roses adorned the tables, their fragrance mingling with the soft notes of a string quartet tucked in the corner. Golden lights glowed warmly against the tall glass windows, reflecting the city skyline Joel had once stood in front of when he thought he might lose her forever. Now that same city bore witness to their joy. Susan wore a gown of understated elegance, ivory silk that skimmed her figure with grace paired with delicate pearl earrings. Joel, dashing in a tailored black suit, couldn't take his eyes off her, not even when guests approached to congratulate them. "Look at Mommy," Zuri squealed, twirling in her own tiny lavender dress, curls bouncing as she clutched a small bouquet. "She's a princess tonight." Laughter rippled through the room, warm and unforced. For many of Joel's old colleagues and investors, this was the first time they had seen him so utterly at peace. His usual guarded reserve replaced by unshakable joy. When it was time for Joel's toast, the clinking of glasses silenced the crowd. He stood tall, his hand never leaving Susan's. "I used to believe my greatest achievement was what I built with money," Joel said, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "But then I met Susan. She reminded me that the real wealth in this life is kindness freely given, love courageously shared, and family." He glanced at Zuri, whose hazel eyes shone up at him, chosen and cherished. A hush settled, broken only by the swell of applause and a few discreetly dabbed eyes. Susan leaned in, whispering, "You'll make me cry in front of all these people." Joel smiled. "Then let them see what real love looks like." Later, as the orchestra shifted into a slow waltz, Joel drew Susan into his arms. The world blurred away, the roses, the chandeliers, the glittering city. All that remained was the steady rhythm of their steps and the warmth of his hand at her back. "I still can't believe this is real," Susan whispered, her cheek against his shoulder. "It's real," Joel murmured. "Forever real. Tonight is just the beginning." And as they moved together under the lights, Zuri spun circles around them, laughter ringing like music itself, completing the portrait of a love that had been tested, broken, healed, and finally crowned with joy. It was more than an engagement party. It was proof that even in the unlikeliest of places, a curb outside a bakery, a modest kitchen filled with bills and weary hands, true love could find its way home. Thank you so much for watching and supporting my channel. Your love, comments, and shares mean everything to me. Grateful for each of you. Let's keep growing together with love from Whispers of